Welcome to all you guys joining in at all of our campuses. To those of you at Northgate, glad you're here. Thanks for being with us. And you guys out at Madras, glad you're here. And for those of you who are watching online, we're excited that you're joining in with us and that you're getting something out of this service today. But honestly, we wish you'd come and be a part because you're really missing out if you're not at one of our campuses today, especially today because we're in this series called Do Something, and we've been talking about how to do something about poverty at all of our campuses. And we today are actually taking part in a project together where we're going to do something together, and it's going to be a lot of fun. We think it's going to make a huge difference in the lives of some people in our community. So if you're watching online, you're not here, I guess ask a friend how cool it was, because they'll tell you, and we're really sorry you missed out, but we want you to come be a part of this sometime. Let me start out today on our topic, and I want to first start by asking you a question. And it goes like this. I want you to think about a moment in your life when you felt the richest you'd ever felt in your life. Now, I know for some of you, you're going to think really sappy, sentimental stuff, like some dude's going to say, well, the day I got married, I felt like the richest guy in the world. And I just want to say, whatever, dude, just forget that. I know you're trying to earn brownie points, but we're talking rich as in money, okay? Think about a time in your life when you just thought, man, I feel really rich. Maybe you bought something, made a big purchase, or maybe you got some money. You came into some money at one time, and you just felt really, really rich. What was that like for you, and what was that moment in your life when you felt really rich? Now, you think about yours. I'll tell you about one of mine. Actually, two of them come to my mind. The first one was this. I was probably about 8 or 9 years old, and my family, the guys in my family, they always had this work day. It was always on Labor Day. And my grandfather took me along on this work day. And what all the men in my family would do is go out and they would cut firewood for the winter. A lot of us had wood-burning heaters and things like that, fireplaces. And so they'd all go out on one day and cut this wood together. My grandfather took me when I was really little, and he let me run the hydraulic wood splitter. If you know anything about dudes, you know we love to work large power tools. I mean, it's just like the greatest day of our life, and I was in heaven. I thought it was the greatest job I'd ever done. All I got to do all day was sit on this chair and run this splitter. I'd push a lever back and forth, and they'd put the wood on, and this thing would push it across this big blade, and the wood would split, and it felt like really powerful. I thought it was cool. But I was 8 or 9, and after the end of the day was done, my grandfather, he gave me a check for $20. I thought I was the richest guy in the world. It was my very first paycheck. It was the first check I got with my name on it. And you'd have thought he gave me $1 million because I just felt so rich. I got that $20 paycheck. Another time I remember feeling really rich in my life, I was actually in college, which I know is kind of weird because most college students are pretty poor. I was actually really fortunate. I was lucky in college. I was fortunate enough to go to school on a full scholarship. I had a full ride to school, and so I worked jobs all the way through school, my whole 4 years, and I was living part-time at school, part-time at home, and at this point in my life, I didn't have a ton of financial responsibilities. I didn't have a lot of bills hanging over my head, and I was working, and I had school paid for, and so I was able, because my parents really trained me well, to save a lot of money, and that was what they drilled in me as a kid, and so I just lived that way. I just saved a lot of money when I was in college to hopefully use it for the future. And so long story short, came to my junior year, and I wound up dating this amazing girl, most amazing girl I'd ever met in my whole life, and I thought to myself, I got to figure out a way to get this girl to marry me. And so I went to a jewelry store one day, and I took all of that money that I had saved up for about 3 years at that point, and I walked into that jewelry store, and I paid cash for a diamond engagement ring. And I felt like the man. I mean, I had just bought, for the first time in my life, I had just bought something that had 4 numbers in the price tag. First time I'd ever done that, and I paid cash for it. I had never done that, and I just tell you, I felt so rich in that moment. Now, listen, I don't know what your moment was that you were thinking about, but I'll tell you one thing that I'm pretty sure is true about your moment, because it's true about my moment. Since that moment in your life, when you felt like you were the richest you'd ever been, my guess is you probably made a lot more money since then, haven't you? And like me, if your moment was a moment where you bought something really big for the first time, my guess is you probably bought some stuff that cost way more. You've spent even more numbers in the price tag than what you did in that moment. But the truth is, how much money you made, or how much you got to save up at that time, or even how big the purchase was, that's not the real reason you felt rich, because it wasn't for me either. You know, the reason that I felt rich in those moments, and it had nothing to do with the amount of money, it had nothing to do with the amount of the price tag. It had everything to do with one simple fact. In those moments that I felt the richest, I had one thing. I had margin in my life. I had what you might call breathing room. I had freedom financially. See, I felt like I was controlling the money in that moment and not the other way around, the money controlling me. And I'll bet if we were to pass the mic around and let you guys tell your story about when you felt rich, my guess is that's probably the reason. Now, if you haven't been here for the past few weeks, here's what we've been talking about in this series. We've been talking about how do we collectively come together, and how do we do something about poverty in our world, and how do we become more generous kind of people. And we've been looking at one section of the Bible that was written specifically on how to do this, specifically to rich people. And what we've learned in this series is that most of us who are here watching this, or you're listening to this today, most of us are rich people. And I know if you hadn't been here for the series, you're already saying to yourself, oh, okay, but not me. You know, I'm not rich. And I get that, because that's what we've been learning. Most of us who are rich, we just don't feel rich. But see, here's what we've learned. Rich is like a moving target. You know, it always seems like being rich is just like one level or a couple of levels ahead of where I am right now. So most rich people go around living as if they're not, because they don't feel that way. And just like you don't think you're rich, even though the truth is everybody who's watching here today, for the vast majority of us, we're in like the top 1/3 of wage earners in the entire world. In fact, the vast majority of us are in the top 10% of wage earners in the world. And again, if you don't believe me, you can go back and watch the messages in this series that we've done so far. But I say all that because this is the important part of that. What we've been discovering in this series is that most of us truly are rich, but the problem is we don't feel rich. So we're just sort of learning from this little section of the Bible from a letter that a guy named Paul, he's an apostle, a guy who followed Jesus and wrote most of the New Testament, wrote to his protege, a guy who he was mentoring, and it's this young guy named Timothy. And Paul gives him some advice because he's trying to lead a group of Christians, and he says, let me give you some advice to tell the rich Christians in order to help them become generous people. And let me just catch you up to where we've been and show you how this all applies. Here's what he said so far. He says, command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. And we talked about this last week if you were here. We learned that, as your income goes up, the tendency in all of us is we want to start putting more and more and more of our hope or our trust or our reliance on our wealth. Because the more money you have, the more you start to feel like, wow, I can feel safe, or I can get security, I can find peace in saving more or earning a little bit more. And the truth is, we learned that you can never really do that. You may feel like you can, but the truth is you can never save, or you can never earn enough to safeguard yourself from every single tragedy. Now, it feels like you can. And the more you try to do it, the more your hope and your trust just migrate away from the one who provides your wealth, which is God, and it moves toward the stuff that he provides you. So that's why Paul says, hey, tell people who are rich, who've been blessed with more than they need. He says, tell them to be real, real careful, because there's a trap here. He says, if you're not careful, you're going to find that your hope or your trust is just going to slowly wind up in your wealth and not in God, who is the provider of your wealth. And that's where we left it last week. Now, listen, if you're new to church, or this is your first time here, or maybe you've been out of church for a while and you're coming back, I get what this feels like. You maybe had a stereotype of church, and you said, man, the churches I went to growing up, all they talked about was money, and that seems like all they care about. And I just want you to know that's not what this is. That's not what we're talking about these days. In fact, what we're really trying to learn is it's just what I just mentioned to you. We're trying to learn, how do we keep our hope from migrating? How do we keep our trust and our security and our reliance? How do we keep it from sliding it over towards what we have and move it to where it ought to be, and move our trust and our hope towards God? That's what these verses are about. How do you keep your hope and your trust from migrating to your wealth? And this is how Paul says that we can keep that from happening. See, so far what we've learned is he's talked about the what. Today he's going to talk about the how. He's kind of going to give us a how-to list on how to do this. And here's where he starts. The next part of this section, he says, command them, the rich people, those who have more than they need, he says, command them to do good. Now, what's interesting here is this. He doesn't tell them to be good. Now, why didn't he tell them that? Well, because every Christ follower is commanded to be good. I mean, you know this is true. It doesn't matter whether you're a rich Christian or a poor Christian or a middle-class Christian. It doesn't matter. Everybody who follows Jesus, all Christians are supposed to strive to be good people. What Paul is saying here is what we're getting into is something more. It goes beyond that. He's saying this is for Christians who are rich, Christians who find themselves blessed with more than what they need. Because remember, that's the definition of rich, when you have more than you need. He says they shouldn't just do good in the normal sort of way. They should do, well, gooder. They should do more. And Paul then goes on and he clarifies it. Look at the next phrase. He says, command them to do good, to be rich, not just in stuff. He says, be rich in good deeds. In other words, he's saying, look, be more than average. Do more than just, the average amount of good. Go beyond, go above what most people do when they go out and they do good things for other people. Now, why does he say that? Because he knows the more you've been given, or the more you're blessed with, the greater your opportunity is to do good. And you know this is true. The greater your wealth, or the more stuff you're blessed with in this life, you have a better opportunity. You have more of an opportunity to do good with that stuff. Now, I know that sounds like common sense, but let me tell you why this is so hard. This is hard for all of us, me included. There is a tendency in every single one of us, and here's how that tendency goes. As you gain more wealth, you wind up gaining more discretionary time and more discretionary money. In other words, the more wealth you accumulate, the more freedom you get to do what you want with your time, or to do what you want with your money. However, the more freedom you get, the more that you and I are tempted to take that extra time or to take that extra money and, well, use it for ourselves. Or, at worst, just to waste it. I mean, come on, think about this. Isn't it true that whenever you and I find that we discover, oh, I've got extra time on my hands, or wow, I've got some extra money that I didn't expect to get, and we just come into that and it sort of surprises us? What's the tendency in most of us? What do we do with that most of the time? Isn't it true that a lot of times we waste it? Or we just sort of assume, well, that's for me, and we just use it on ourselves. Now, if you've been here, we've been sort of talking this through and trying to get a hold on what it really looks like for people who are rich. What does that really look like? And I'm going to give you another example. Maybe you never even thought about this before, but some of us are really rich and we don't even understand how rich we are. We don't even have a clue. Some of you never even thought about this before. I'm about to open up a whole new category, so just hang with me for a second. This might blow some of your minds, but let's put it this way. On average, okay? On average, most of us who are watching today, we work 5 days a week. Now, I know some of you work more than that, and I get that. Some of you work 6 days a week. I get that. But just for argument's sake, on average, I'd say, most people in our country work 5 days a week, right? And here's the thing. In those 5 days, you are able to earn enough money that will feed and shelter and clothe you and your family for 7 days. Now, when I say that, you're kind of thinking, well, why are you even telling me that? I get that. See, that's the point. We don't even think that's a big deal. But you realize that in most parts of the world, that's not how it works. In most parts of the world, that's not the way the economy runs. Most places, you work a day, you can get by for a day. In fact, in a lot of places in our world, you work for a day and you can barely get by for that one day. But for us, we've been conditioned because we work and live in a society where we've been blessed so much that we can work 5 days and get by for 7. It's almost like we don't even think about it anymore, and it feels like we're even owed those 2 days off, right? And why is that? Because simply you've been blessed, and I've been blessed to live in a culture, in a society that works that way. It's actually possible in our society to accumulate in 5 days what it takes to live for 7 days. And listen, I'm not saying that to make you feel guilty. This is not about feeling guilty. Remember, we talked about this 2 weeks ago. It's about being grateful. All I'm saying is this. It just means simply you and I are blessed. We've been blessed with extra. We just have more than we need. Think about it this way. If you work 60 hours in a week, okay, and I get that some of you work more than that, and I get some of you don't work as much as that. Just for argument's sake, let's say you work 60 hours a week, and then let's say you sleep 8 hours a night, and you're thinking, man, I'd kill for that much sleep. I get it, okay, me too. But let's just, for argument's sake, let's say you work 60 hours and you sleep for 8 hours a night. You ever thought about how much time that leaves you with? I mean, if that were the case, you realize you are left with 52 hours in your week, and those 52 hours, they're yours. You can do whatever you want to do with those hours. Now, look, I know you're busy and you got responsibilities. Me too. I got stuff I need to go do and places I need to be. I get all that. My point is this. We just have more than what we need. We've been blessed. We're just rich with time. We're rich with extra resources. Now, what typically happens with the extras? Well, usually we use them for us. Typically we just waste them. We just they just get taken up. And again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with you enjoying what you have. In fact, that's in our text today. I mean, God gives us everything for us to enjoy. That's in the Bible. There's nothing wrong with that. And I'm not trying to make you feel guilty. I'm only trying to make that simple point. You and I have extra. And Paul just says, if you do have some extra, if you're rich, you got some extra time, you got some extra money, just remember, you have an extra responsibility. You do. Because there's always that tendency for us to want to put our hope in our extra, to feel safe and to feel secure in our extra. And the way you keep that from happening is you shift from just being rich with time or being rich with money, and you become rich in what Paul says is good deeds. That's what he says. He goes on. He says, command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and be generous and willing to share. And now that last part of that verse, that's where he's bearing down right on the money thing. He's really talking about our wealth, not just our time. Why is he doing that? Because, see, I think Paul makes an assumption that is really actually true. And here's the assumption, and it's simply this. The richer you are, and this is true for all of us, the richer you are, the more you have, the less you will tend to give away. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, well, I see rich people giving away lots of stuff. You know, I mean, every time I turn on the TV, there's another rich guy standing there with one of those checks. It's as big as a poster, and he's giving money away. And this rich guy over here, he's setting up a foundation, and he's giving away all kinds of money, and they're doing good all over the world. And rich people are doing lots of stuff. Why you say that the richer you are, the less you give? Well, you're right. That happens, and we see that a lot. Mainly, I think, because rich people are just better at publicizing that. But honestly, the truth is, in our country, you can just look at the stats, but this is true. Rich people, whereas they give larger amounts of money or sums of money in our country, by and large, they give smaller and smaller percentages. In fact, every year when they go and they do surveys on this and they look at who in our country gives away the most money, they'll always find, the people who give away the highest percentage of what they make is always the poorest people among us. It always works that way. In fact, you've probably seen this. You've seen on, like, maybe on Facebook, you've seen a video where they'll set up a camera and they'll go into an inner city and they'll give a homeless guy some food or some money for the day, and they'll just watch and see what he does with it. And a lot of the time, you'll see this guy who has almost nothing. When he gets something, he gives it away to somebody, or he'll give like half of his food or half of his money to somebody. And those of us who watch that, we look at it and go, how could he do that? I mean, it's like, that's all you've got, and you're going to give away half of it? But why don't you just hold on to it? Because here's why that's true. I tell you why I think that happens. Why is it that the poorest among us always give the highest percentage? I think it's this: because poor people understand something that rich people don't understand. And it's this: poor people know, I can't save my way to security. I can't earn enough money to make myself safe and secure. See, rich people don't get that. See, we rich people, we think we can do that. So whenever we get the extra, whenever we get a little bit more than what we need for the moment, we start thinking, wow, I can be safer. Boy, I can be more secure if I just hang on to this, if I don't let it leave my hands. Poor people know better. Why do they know better? Because their hope hasn't yet migrated to their stuff. Their trust has not yet moved to the provision. Their trust is in something else. They don't trust wealth. And so it's easier for them to give away sometimes 20, 30%, or even more. And if you don't believe it, look up the stats. It's just true. The richer you are, the less you tend to give away. Now, the dollar amount may go up, and it makes us feel real good sometimes. But the percentage tends to go down. Now, I'm going to say something to you, and you're going to think this is weird, and I get that, but just hang on, and I'll show you in just a minute. But you need to understand something, and this is important. You realize that God's not impressed with the amount of money you give to help people. I mean, God is not impressed with dollar amounts. I mean, if you're smart, you can think this through, and you can understand, why would he be? I mean, come on, he's God. He's the creator of the universe. He owns everything. How in the world would a set of numbers or a set of zeros at the end of a check ever impress God? Now, I'll tell you one thing that does impress God, and it's not the amount. But I'll tell you, God is impressed with percentage giving. I'll show you. There's a story in the Bible, and it's a moment where Jesus is with his followers, and they're hanging out right outside of the temple. Now, the temple was a place where that people would come to worship, much like what you're doing in church today. You come and you worship, and in their time, they didn't pass around an offering basket or a plate or anything like that during the service. In their time, they just, at the door, they had maybe a jar or a box where people, as they walked in or they walked out, they would bring their gifts, whatever it was was their offering for that day, and they would just drop it in the box or drop it in the jar, and that's how they gave. They do that coming in and out of the door. And Jesus is there with his disciples, his followers, and he's watching these people come in, and they're dropping in their offerings. And Jesus observes something that's happening in this moment, and he uses it to tell his disciples and make a statement about how God feels about this whole topic. In fact, it's in the biography of Jesus that we have called the Book of Mark. It's written by a guy named Mark. It's in chapter 12. Let me read you what happened in this story. It says this: Jesus sat down opposite the place where the offerings were put, and he watched the crowd putting their money into the temple treasury. Many rich people threw in large amounts. Now, we can kind of assume from the way the story is told that these rich people were doing this offering in such a way that they were letting people know what those large amounts were. They were making it known. It wasn't like they were trying to hide it. It wasn't like they were using an envelope so nobody sees. This was like a show. They were making sure everybody knows what I'm giving. So the amount is on display, and the rich people probably wanted it to be that way. But a poor widow came, and she put in 2 very small copper coins worth only a few cents. Now, it's real hard for us to quantify that, but let me see if I can help you understand how much this really was. The amount of money or the coins that this woman is using when she drops in her offering, it's the smallest amount of currency that was in circulation in that day in Palestine where this took place. In fact, if I can give you an example, you know how you're walking through a parking lot and you'll see some coins on the ground, or maybe 1 coin, and you look and you think, I'm going to pick that up. And about the time you see it, you realize that ain't even worth bending over at the waist, and you just walk on by it because it's just, to you, it's just not even worth the effort. That's sort of what we're talking about here. The exact amount was, it was 1/128th of a denarius. And in their day, a denarius was a denomination of money. A denarius was worth about 1 day's wage. Okay, so you take what you can earn in 1 day in that culture and you divide it up into 128 pieces, and we're talking about one of those pieces. More practically speaking, it was about 6 minutes worth of work. 6 minutes of work is what she gave. Now, I want you to watch what Jesus is about to say about this woman's gift. 6 minutes of work. Coins that you and I would probably not even stoop down and pick up. And this is what Jesus says. And notice, not only is Jesus saying this is the heart of God. This is what God thinks about your wealth. And I'm telling you, if you truly comprehend this, it'll change everything about what you think about your money. Here's what he says. Calling his disciples to him. In other words, Jesus says, guys, come here. I want to show you something. I got to tell you this. He's pulling them around. He's teaching them a lesson. He says, truly I tell you, this poor widow has put more into the treasury than all the others. Jesus says, she gave more than all the other people who came before her. With her 2 little copper coins, 2 coins that you wouldn't bother picking up in a parking lot, 2 coins that you could earn working for 6 minutes. And with those 2 coins, Jesus says, that woman was richer toward God than all the others. Wait, Jesus, richer than the guy who put in $1,000? Yeah, richer than him. Richer than the guy before her that put in $10,000? Yeah, richer than him. She gave, Jesus said, more than all of them. And you think, how could that be? It wasn't more. Jesus says, yes, it was. Because the number of zeros is not what matters to God. That's not what moves his heart. Percentages is what move God's heart. Because look at how Jesus finishes. He says, look, they gave out of their wealth. She gave out of her poverty. She put in everything. So listen, when Paul teaches us about what rich people ought to do, and he says that we ought to do good and be rich in good deeds and be generous and be willing to share, I think what he's trying to get through to us is this lesson right here. Those of us who are rich, those who have more than what we need. And again, if you're not there, if you're not rich yet, that's okay. Listen to this, because this is important for you to know. Hopefully one day you will be rich, and this will teach you how to be a good rich person. But for those who are, we should not only be giving more amounts of money, we should be giving higher percentages. Because that's what moves the heart of God. Now let me bring this around full circle for you. When you do this, you realize that you're not just benefiting other people when you give and you help folks in need. You realize the great thing about it is there's a benefit to you too. And you think, well, how can it be a benefit to me if I'm giving away a higher percentage of what I make? I'll show you. And I've talked about this before. Everybody here is living on a percentage of their income. And I know that's probably the most duh thing I've said all day, but it's true. You're living on a percentage of what you make. I'm living on a percentage of what I make. Here's the thing. Most of us have no idea what that is. Most of you, if you think about it, most people don't know how much of their income they're living on. They don't know if it's 80%, 90%, 100%, 120%, because it just comes and goes, and nobody really thinks about that. Everybody lives on a percentage. And I tell people this all the time, especially when I meet people who are just starting out. Whether you're single or you're married, it doesn't matter. Whether you're just starting out in your financial world, I'm telling you, the best thing you can do for yourself financially is to sit down and decide what that number is going to be. Pick a percentage. And you decide, I'm going to live on this much of my income and make it less than 100%. And you just make that commitment non-negotiable for the rest of your life. It doesn't matter what it is, 80%, 70%, 60%, doesn't matter. If you just live off of that percentage for the rest of your life, you know what will happen? Immediately, you'll have margin in your life. You'll have breathing room. And when you have breathing room, let me tell you, you'll have peace in your life. And as a result of having that peace, you know what else will happen? You'll feel like you're rich. No matter how much money you make. It'll be like that first time when you got that first paycheck when you were a little kid. I mean, you'll feel rich, and your income will then grow with you, and your lifestyle gets to grow with it. And not only that, the most important part, you'll be able to give away a higher percentage as you grow. And not only will you start to feel like you're being generous, you'll actually start to be a generous person. See, here's what happens in our country. This is the way it happens with almost all Americans. Almost all of us would be what you would call spontaneous emotional givers. And here's what I mean by that. All of us, especially around this time of year, Christmas time, the holidays, we get bombarded with these messages about places where we can give and all that kind of stuff. And even throughout the year, somebody will come and they'll tell you a story about a family in need or a tragedy that's happened, and you think, oh man, I wish I could do something. Or the kid will come knocking on your door with the Girl Scouts or the Boy Scouts or whatever, and they're selling stuff, and you'll be, oh, I want to help, And what we do in those moments is we're presented with a need right on the moment, spur of the moment kind of thing, and we think, I want to do something. And so what we do is, let me see what I have. And we reach into our pockets and we look and we see, what do I have left over? What do I have that's extra? And we give out of our extra. We give out of our leftovers. And here's a great thing. You do that throughout the year, and you don't even think about it. It's just sort of spontaneous. And then you get to tax time, and you start looking back, and you look at everything you've done throughout the year, and you say to yourself, wow, look, I didn't even realize it. I gave like $500 to charity this year. What a generous person I must be. And you feel really, really generous. But now let's be honest. That amount of money that you just sort of gave spontaneously, spur of the moment, out of an emotional kind of thing, for most of us, it's just a drop in the bucket when we look at it as a percentage of what we make. It's just a small percentage. And here's the other thing. You didn't miss it. It was sort of an accidental thing. Most of what you gave was just out of the leftovers. You didn't even have to think about it. It was just natural. It just sort of happened. Like, for instance, today at every campus, what we're doing is we're giving all of us an opportunity to give of our time. And you can help someone in need. We're doing a meal packaging event right after this service. No matter which campus you're at, you leave this service when it's over, you walk out of here, and you just give us, we said, 10 or 15 minutes. And you're going to help feed some people who maybe don't even know where their family's next meal is coming from. But now let's be honest about what we're about to do. This time that we give today, it's left over. It's extra. You won't miss it. In fact, most of you probably didn't even have to rearrange your schedule. You're going to stick around. You're going to give us 5 or 10 or 15 minutes. You didn't have to make plans for that. You just can kind of do it. Some of you are here for the very first time. You didn't even know we were doing this today. Or you heard about it last week and you forgot. But you don't have to make arrangements. You can do this. You're just going to go out and give of your time, spur of the moment, because it's just extra. Almost everybody can be generous at that level without planning, without thinking about it, because we have so much. But if we want to do what Paul says, if we want to be truly generous, to be rich in good deeds, to go above and beyond the average, the key is this. You have to pre-decide. Not just spur of the moment, not just spontaneous. You pre-decide. Pre-decide with your time. Pre-decide with your money. And pick a percentage before it ever makes it into your hands and say, this is the amount that I will give back, and I want to do something in this world, and it's non-negotiable. This is what I'll spend, this is what I'll save, and this is what I will give away. And the great thing about when you do that, when you pre-decide, is the results of that will be you're going to start giving away a higher percentage than what you currently give away. And you won't just feel generous at the end of the year and you see that amount. You'll know, I am becoming a generous person. And you'll have more margin in your life. You won't just be rich, you'll start to feel rich because you'll have more freedom. And that's what makes you feel rich in the first place. And listen, whenever this topic comes up and we talk about money and we talk about giving, I know what most people are feeling. You're feeling like, here's a guy who's trying to make me feel guilty because he wants me to give more money to this church. And listen, if that's not where you are, and maybe you don't trust us yet as a church. Maybe you hadn't even been here long enough to trust us. And I don't blame you because you hadn't been here very long and you don't have a reason to trust us. We say this every time. If you don't trust us, don't give your money here. Find somewhere that you do trust. Find a place where they're doing things that you believe in and give the money there. Pre-decide there and give a percentage there. this is about what we want for you, not what we want from you. This is what God wants for you. Pre-decide with your time. Pre-decide your percentage. Give it somewhere. Now, before we end this today, as we always do, I want to call your attention back to the connection card that we've already talked to you about in this service. And you'll notice on the back of it today there are a few steps that we're going to encourage you to take. We're all going to take these together. And if you're here for the first time, you just need to know every week this is a part of what we do. We try to take next steps. We try to not be people who just listen to what God's Word says. We try to be people who actually put it into practice. And so we try to encourage each other by taking next steps. And we want to partner with you on whatever steps you take. So on the back of your card today, you'll notice several steps that you can take. And these are just between you and God. Nobody's going to contact you about these. Nobody's going to pressure you or anything. We just know sometimes it's helpful to make a physical kind of commitment, to check a box sort of between you and God and saying, I'm going to do this. And so on the back of your card it says, my next step today. And there's several things that you can do. Maybe today your next step is simple. You just want to decide, hey, I'm going to come back and I'm going to keep coming for the remainder of this series, and I'm going to keep learning about what God wants me to do in my life. That's a great next step. Or maybe you want to commit to being here and actually participating in what we've got planned from now until the end of the year. We've got so many projects that you've been hearing about, and we've got more all the way through the end of the year. Maybe you've never done what we talked about today. Maybe you've never pre-decided before about the percentage of your time or the percentage of your money that you're going to live on and what you'll give away. And this week, maybe you just want to take a step and say, I'm going to sit down. If you have a family, sit down with your family and talk about this and have that conversation. And even if it's just 1% or 5%, start somewhere and say, we're going to do this. And you can then, as you grow and you grow in this giving thing, you can revisit that every year. And as God blesses you, you can grow that percentage, and you can start to become a more and more generous kind of person. And you can do that together. But whatever step you decide to take, if you drop your card in the offering at the end of the service today, our commitment to you is we're going to pray for you. We're going to pray that God will lead you in whatever step you're taking today. And if you want more information on our church, again, if you're here for the first time, you can let us know that on the right-hand side, and we'll contact you about any of those, and we'll be in touch and give you the information that you need. You'll also notice on here today, you can continue to sign up for our Thanksgiving meal. Almost all the shifts are taken, but I want to remind you that we still need your help for the day of the meal on Thanksgiving Day. In fact, we really need a lot of you to decide that you'll deliver meals. It's one of the most important parts of the meal that we do on Thanksgiving. We take meals to people who are in need all throughout our county and our area. We really need your help on that. So if you could deliver meals, that would be of a great help right now for us. And again, if it's your first time today, let me just say, speak directly to you. Man, we're so honored that you're here, that you're our guest today. We really are. And this card is the only thing we want you to put in the offering today. We really are honored that you're here. In fact, you fill that card out for the first time, we want to give you something free for doing that. If you stop by the information table on your way out, pick up that free book there. It's a great resource that we think will be helpful to you. It's a short book that summarizes the story of God in the Bible. We think it'll help you no matter where you are. We're just so thankful you're here, and we hope you'll come back next week. But now, I want to conclude by saying just one last thing. You know, in our world today, whenever Christians get mentioned, you know this is true. Usually when Christians get talked about in our culture, it's in the context of what we're protesting, or what we're against, or who we're voting for, or who we're against, or whatever. And I just want you to think, can you imagine how that would change if every Christian got right what we've been talking about today? If every follower of Jesus just took Jesus seriously and said, you know what, I'm not just going to be generous when I see a need. I'm not just going to be generous when I have the mood strike me. I'm going to pre-decide to live a generous lifestyle. I'm just going to make that decision. And I won't just take my extra time and my extra money that God blessed me with, and I'm not going to waste it, or I'm not going to just assume that it's mine. I'm going to set a percentage, and it's non-negotiable for me. Man, what if all the statistics they did next year when they came back and they found that the majority of the money and the time that was given away to help people in our world was given by followers of Jesus? Man, I think we'd stop making headlines for what we're against, and maybe we'd start being a people that reflect the heart of God, the God that we follow. I think it would change everything about the way the world views us and views the church. I think it would change your level of peace, and I think it would change your level of satisfaction with your life. See, people who choose to live like this, they wind up living with margin in their lives because they start controlling their money, and their money's not controlling them, and they start controlling their extra time, not the other way around. And whenever you do that, here's what will happen. You'll go from being just rich to actually feeling like you're rich, and you'll go from just feeling generous to actually being generous. Let's bow, and I'll pray. God, would you teach us today how to be rich in good deeds, to see all that you've blessed us with, and just because we're so grateful, God, that we'd make a decision. We're not going to use it all just for us. God, help us to be a people who are priority percentage givers, not just people who give occasionally out of our leftovers. God, make us more like you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.